Have you ever wished you could take back something you said, a word spoken in anger, a quick judgment, or a moment when you talked so much that you missed what really mattered? Words are powerful. But sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is to say nothing at all. When anger rises, it often comes like a storm, sudden, loud, and overwhelming. In those heated moments, our natural impulse is to defend ourselves, to push back, or to let our emotions spill out through words we may later regret. Anger narrows our vision, causing us to focus only on the offense in front of us while forgetting the bigger picture. When we speak in that state, our words tend to be sharp, cutting, and sometimes completely out of proportion to what the situation deserves. We may even hurt the very people we care about most, leaving behind wounds that take longer to heal than the moment of conflict ever lasted. That is why silence becomes such a powerful choice. Choosing not to speak when anger is boiling inside is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is the ability to step back, to take a breath, and to remember that words once spoken cannot be unsaid. Silence in anger provides the space our minds and hearts need to catch up. It allows us to process what really happened and what we truly feel. Sometimes what seems like a personal attack is actually a misunderstanding. Sometimes the frustration we feel is less about the other person and more about our own exhaustion, stress, or unmet expectations. Without silence, we risk reacting to the wrong thing and escalating a situation that could have been gently resolved. But with silence, we create a pause, a sacred gap where clarity can emerge. That pause is often the difference between a conversation that destroys and a conversation that heals. There is also strength in refusing to let anger dictate the tone of our interactions. Anyone can shout back, anyone can fire off a harsh response, but it takes true discipline to remain quiet until the emotion passes. Silence gives us back control. Instead of being slaves to the heat of the moment, we become masters of our responses. This control not only protects others but also preserves our own peace, because if we are honest, the regret that follows after lashing out in anger is heavy to carry. We replay our words in our heads, wishing we could take them back, but knowing we cannot. Silence spares us from that burden. Even in silence, we are not powerless. Our quietness can speak volumes. Sometimes refusing to respond to provocation sends a stronger message than any argument ever could. It shows that we value peace over pride, relationship over being right, and wisdom over impulse. In many cases, silence diffuses anger rather than fueling it. Arguments need two active participants. When one chooses quiet restraint, the fire of conflict often dies down on its own. This does not mean we never address the issue. It simply means we wait until our words can build rather than destroy, until our tone reflects calm rather than chaos. In that way, silence in anger is not avoidance but preparation. It is the act of holding back destructive energy so that when we finally do speak, our words carry healing, truth, and strength rather than regret. In a world where information travels faster than ever, the temptation to speak before knowing the full story is almost irresistible. A headline flashes across a screen, a rumor passes through a conversation, or a single sentence is taken out of context, and suddenly our minds rush to form opinions. Words follow quickly, whether spoken aloud or shared online, and before long, we may find ourselves defending a position built on shaky ground. When we speak without all the facts, we risk not only spreading falsehoods, but also damaging the trust of those who hear us. People may begin to doubt our discernment, wondering if we value truth or if we simply enjoy being the first to respond. That is why silence in these moments becomes a shield, protecting both our integrity and our relationships. Silence, when we are uncertain, gives us time to investigate and reflect. It is an act of humility, an acknowledgement that we do not yet know enough to form a fair judgment. There is wisdom in saying less, in waiting until the fog clears, in choosing not to add our voice to the noise until we are confident that what we speak is grounded in truth. Too often, when facts finally come to light, they reveal a reality far different from what we first assumed. Those who rush to speak are left embarrassed, sometimes even ashamed, realizing that their quick words did more harm than good. But those who remain silent until they knew the truth walk away with credibility intact, because silence has a way of preserving dignity when uncertainty is present. Another danger in speaking prematurely is that it can harm others in irreversible ways. Words carry weight, and even if later corrected, accusations and judgments can leave lasting scars. A single careless remark can tarnish someone's reputation or fracture a relationship beyond repair. Silence in such moments is not indifference, it is protection. It shields others from the consequences of our unchecked assumptions, and it shields us from the guilt of realizing that we wounded someone unjustly. By choosing not to speak until we understand fully, we practice compassion as much as wisdom. There is also a deeper strength in resisting the cultural pressure to always have an opinion. In conversations, especially heated ones, there is often an expectation to respond immediately. Remaining silent can feel uncomfortable, as if our worth is measured by how quickly we can add to the discussion. But silence here is courage. It declares that being accurate is more important than being quick, that thoughtfulness outweighs impulse. It is not about winning arguments, but about honoring truth. And truth, as patient as it may be, does not need us to rush in and defend it before we know its entirety. In practicing silence until we have all the facts, we create a rhythm of listening first, then speaking. We train our hearts to discern rather than assume, to hold back rather than react, and to value understanding over speed. This posture not only strengthens our character, but also invites deeper trust from those around us, who come to know us as people who speak carefully, wisely, and with integrity. Life today is louder than ever. From the moment we wake up, we are greeted by buzzing alarms, endless notifications, conversations, responsibilities, and a constant stream of noise from the outside world. It is easy to move through an entire day without ever experiencing a true moment of quiet, yet silence is often where the deepest clarity and comfort can be found. In the stillness, when the voices of others fade and the rush of our own thoughts slows down, we open ourselves to a presence greater than our own. It is in that silence where guidance is received, where peace begins to settle, and where the strength to move forward is renewed. When we never pause long enough to be still, we can mistake constant motion for progress. We convince ourselves that productivity is the same as purpose, that filling every moment with activity is the way to meaning. But the soul does not thrive on busyness. It thrives on presence, and presence requires stillness. Silence creates space for us to hear what cannot be heard when we are distracted. It clears away the clutter of comparison, the pressure of expectation, and the lies of inadequacy that often whisper the loudest in chaos. In that quiet space, we are reminded of what is true, what is eternal, and what is unshakable. Silence also invites us to listen more deeply. Too often, we come into prayer or reflection with a list of words, requests, and concerns. We pour everything out, yet rarely pause long enough to receive. Just as any meaningful conversation requires both speaking and listening, our spiritual lives require stillness so that we can hear the whispers meant for us. These whispers may not come in dramatic displays, but in gentle nudges, impressions, or a deep sense of calm that fills the heart. If we never embrace silence, we miss these subtleties and mistake the absence of noise for the absence of guidance. Choosing silence in a world that idolizes noise is an act of trust. It is saying, I do not have to fill the air with my words to be heard, and I do not have to run in circles to be held. It is surrendering the need to control every outcome and opening our hearts to direction beyond our own understanding. There is freedom in this posture because it allows us to step away from striving and step into resting. And often the very answers we have been chasing arrive not in our frantic searching, but in the stillness we once avoided. There is also a kind of healing that happens in silence, when grief weighs heavy, when anxiety spins endlessly, or when decisions feel impossible. Silence wraps around us like a blanket. It reminds us that we are not alone, that even in the absence of words, there is presence, comfort, and peace waiting to be embraced. In those moments, silence becomes less about the absence of sound and more about the fullness of presence, a sacred space where strength is renewed and courage is restored. There are moments in life when silence becomes the wisest response to criticism. We all know what it feels like to be misunderstood, judged unfairly, or spoken about in ways that do not reflect the truth of who we are. The immediate reaction is often to defend ourselves, to explain, or to fight back with equal force. Yet answering every critic not only drains our energy, but can also pull us into conflicts that rob us of peace. Silence in these moments is not a sign of defeat. It is a deliberate choice to rise above the noise rather than being consumed by it. When we stay quiet, we acknowledge that not every battle deserves our words, and not every voice deserves our attention. Criticism can be painful, especially when it comes from those we love or those whose opinions carry weight in our lives. But responding to every harsh word only binds us to the opinions of others. Silence frees us. It allows us to stand firm in the truth of who we are without feeling the need to constantly explain ourselves. Words can sometimes inflame criticism further, while silence communicates a quiet confidence that does not need outside validation. There is strength in refusing to let the negativity of others dictate our actions or steal our inner calm. Remaining silent in the face of criticism also gives us time to discern. Not all criticism is destructive. Some contain seeds of truth that can help us grow. But when our first instinct is to respond defensively, we miss the opportunity to reflect on what might actually be useful. Silence gives us that breathing space, a pause long enough to separate what is helpful from what is harmful. It prevents us from reacting out of wounded pride and instead allows us to respond later, if necessary, with grace and clarity. There is also wisdom in recognizing that silence often disarms the critic more effectively than argument ever could. Arguments require participation, and when one person chooses not to engage, the fire loses its fuel. Silence does not mean we agree with what was said, but it does mean we will not waste our energy fighting battles that do not deserve our focus. In this way, silence protects our time, our emotions, and our purpose. We begin to live less for the approval of others and more for the alignment of our own values and calling. Furthermore, silence in criticism teaches us endurance. Life will always bring opinions, judgments, and voices that try to define us. If we chase every one of them, we will exhaust ourselves trying to please everyone and in the end, please no one. Silence helps us build resilience, reminding us that the weight of another person's words does not have to crush us. Instead, we stand taller by choosing not to answer every attack, showing that our worth is not determined by the shifting winds of public opinion, but by something far more unshakable. There are times when silence is the only wise response in the face of grief and deep sorrow. When pain runs so deep that words feel empty, silence becomes a language of its own. We often feel the urge to fill the heaviness with explanations, advice, or comforting phrases, but sometimes those words, though well-meaning, only skim the surface of someone else's suffering. In moments of grief, silence speaks more tenderly than speeches ever could. Sitting quietly beside someone in their pain communicates a presence that no sentence can capture. It says, "I am here, and I do not need to fix this. I will share the weight with you." That kind of silence carries healing because it validates the depth of the hurt without trying to rush it away. Grief has a way of leaving us raw and vulnerable. The person who grieves may not even know what they need, and in those fragile moments, silence provides safety. It allows space for tears to fall freely, for emotions to surface without fear of judgment, and for the heart to process what feels unbearable. Silence does not pressure the grieving to be strong or to move on. Instead, it offers room for them to simply be, to feel the full weight of their loss, and to begin the slow work of healing at their own pace. Words can sometimes unintentionally minimize pain, but silence honors it. There is also a sacredness in quiet presence. When we sit in silence with someone hurting, we acknowledge that grief is too great to be solved with explanations. We recognize that suffering does not always need answers, but rather companionship. Silence becomes a gentle reminder that though loss cannot be erased, it does not have to be carried alone. The person grieving may not remember anything we said, but they will remember that we stayed, that we were there in the stillness when their world felt broken. That memory of shared silence often becomes a source of strength long after the tears have slowed. Even for ourselves, silence in grief allows us to process what words cannot reach. Loss creates a tangle of emotions: shock, anger, confusion, sadness. And trying to articulate them too quickly can feel overwhelming. In silence, we find permission to let those emotions rise and fall without having to explain them. It is in the quiet where we may sense comfort that is beyond human effort, a peace that gently enters the cracks of our brokenness. Silence becomes the soil where healing begins to grow, slowly but surely, even if we do not yet see it. In the face of grief, silence is not emptiness but compassion. It is the refusal to reduce sorrow to platitudes or to rush through the process of mourning. It is presence without performance, love without condition, comfort without demand. And in that kind of silence, the grieving find not only rest, but also the assurance that even in the deepest valleys, they are not abandoned.